While I don't quite feel up to delving into the last two or three bigger Slaughterhouse videos, a comment reminded me that since their specific time of membership was, as far as I could find, unknown, I decided to put these so-called miscellaneous members into their own separate mini video. Admittedly, it helped that there really wasn't much to them, and besides the audio, as is often the case with me, one of the only other things that gave me some degree of trouble was sticking up background icons for their sections. Anyway, as you know already by the title, the members were Nice Guy and Miasma. And to preface everything, most of what we know about them are based on very small descriptions of their powers and what little screen time their clone selves had. As I've said many times before, but will nevertheless say again, clones don't give the most accurate portrayal of said parahumans. Their original selves likely were much better with their powers. And, as noted by the creator of said clones, their personalities and methods of attack are only mostly right. More importantly, said creator also ironed out certain traits and personality quirks that may have contributed to their original counterparts' deaths and or captures. Granted, those discrepancies helped to form other quote-unquote bad habits. Right. Nice Guy was a stranger, and he had the ability to make himself seem like just another quote-unquote face in the crowd. More descriptively, he made it so that other people could not perceive him as a threat. And even if he conducted violent acts and or had people's focus directed at him, he would still not attract suspicion. In fact, even if one was aware of him as Nice Guy and knew he would be around, upon first encounter with Nice Guy, he would once again just seem like some guy. Even if another person, say, on a radio, was actively telling the people under Nice Guy's influence that he was Nice Guy and that he was a threat, said influence would still not be broken. Now, how was all that possible? Basically, for his power to work, he simply needed, from what I could understand, any of the following: the location of the targets, the voice of the targets, and or line of sight with the targets, with more acquired information ostensibly leading to a stronger level of influence. Though, even when all of the latter are known, it seems like if Nice Guy was not as actively focused on the person, said person did have a greater ability to at least tell that something was off. That said, based on the limited story examples, it seems like even under those circumstances, breaking out of his power was not possible. At most, one may be able to unconsciously do one quick thing or action, such as briefly grabbing his arm and anything else along those lines. For weaknesses, they aren't that complicated. First, the most obvious one is that if someone was completely unknown to him, his power would not take hold. Granted, easier said than done. Second, and related to that, was how as much as he could influence the minds of others, he himself was still susceptible to mental influence. As such, other strangers, like Imp, for example, and potentially Masters, could hypothetically take him by surprise and or counter him. Third, and I guess also potentially fourth, Nice Guy's power may have a range limit. That, or it could not transmit through radio. Truthfully, I'm uncertain of if it was only one, both, or neither of those. It could have been some other unknown factor for all I know. Not to mention, there is something to be said about the notion of whether the person contacting their allies would themselves be affected too, had Nice Guy directly spoken to them. Basically, would the radio operator wonder why a civilian was talking to them, or would they immediately be clued in that the other person speaking to them was an enemy? I don't know, but it is food for thought. Regardless, while the person on the radio or communication device may not be able to convince the people on the other side that Nice Guy was meddling with them, phrases or code words could be prepared beforehand to indicate mental manipulation. Master Stranger protocols. So, I wouldn't call this last one a weakness per se, but given that he was otherwise just a normal dude, like any innocent bystander, there was the chance of him being inadvertently harmed or killed. Now, if you thought Nice Guy was a bit bare bones, well, get ready. Miasma was also a stranger, and he had the ability to become invisible, and while in that state, he would emit an odorless gas that could cause headaches, tinnitus, and watery eyes. With prolonged exposure, said gas could also lead to blindness, memory loss, and comas, perhaps even death. Note that I have no idea whether the gas was something passively emitted or something he had to actively emit, or a mix of both. I also don't know whether his gas was always effective, as in, if it had a shelf life of sorts. Does distance lower its effectiveness, and or does it lose potency the longer it floats around the air? For weaknesses of note, I have one, and keep in mind that it's based on a very brief moment related to a Miasma clone. Said moment showed that if Miasma was hit while invisible, he would create an explosion of thick green smoke and briefly reappear. And I do mean briefly, since within that same scene he went invisible again after, I say, at most, a few seconds. Well, I'm done, and while quick, it at least somewhat got me in the mood again. Plus, since it'll probably motivate me to do them sooner, I'll say that there will probably be 2 more videos in this series. One will relate to the 9 Beginning of Infestation, Arc 11, up to the 9 Post-Prey, Arc 14, while the other will be the hybrid clones of the colloquially called Slaughterhouse 9000. I may divide the former video into 2, but probably not. But again, depends on how much information I end up gathering.